what happens in this movie, Robert? Let's talk about that in 50 words or less.
All right, so as we've talked about, we open with the Roman conquest of Germania. Russell Crowe's character is like the commander of this legion, actually several legions, but they're finishing this conquest, and old man Marcus Aurelius shows up with his two kids and tries to confer upon Maximus, Russell Crowe, the emperorship of Rome, because he knows the Senate squabbles, and he knows that the politics is starting to rot it, and he knows that all great empires destroy themselves from within long before they are destroyed from without. And Maximus doesn't want this. Like, no, I want to go home. I want to see my family. I want to farm.
I
I
have
am.
literally done my bit for God and country.
Look, man, I am just Zack Snyder. I want slow-mo of wheat farming for the rest of my life. That's really all I need out of this.
In a few years, there's this movie called Rebel Moon. It's my porn.
Pretty much. But he's sort of convinced that, you really do kind of need to do this. And let me think about it. And Maximus tells his son, yeah, no, buddy, you ain't becoming king. And his son then, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, father, and murders him.
Murders him by pressing his face into his chest and essentially like smushing his face with a pillow. That kind of an effect. Interesting way to kill a guy.
Leche de madre,
Mm.
if you're a catch wrestler. If you know Spanish, you know what that translates to.
Okay.
So yeah, kills him and then says, I am the emperor now. And Maximus, like, I'm not going to swear loyalty to you. I know you're unfit for this job. And he decides, and you have things like, okay, maybe I rally the troops. Maybe we do this right now. And the men are like, no, the new Caesar. Oh wait, they do call him Caesar.
Yeah.
Okay, this is post Caesar then.
Several times. That's why I didn't want to necessarily correct you and get into
No,
a
no.
fight
If
about
I'm
it.
wrong, yeah, no. If I'm wrong about my
They
my chronology on
several
that, you should
times
have
called
corrected
him
me.
Caesar right in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, this is post. Okay. Yeah. But Commodus figures that Maximus might be a problem, so you know what? Let's just kill him. Let's just make it easy. This is the answer to all my problems, right? Because he's that kind of character.
Yeah.
So they try to kill Russell Crowe, but that doesn't work. He's got plot armor. But, well, for the time being. But they do manage to kill his wife and kid back on his home, and he escapes his assassination attempt. Heads there, finds their dead bodies. He's kind of broken down. Then he gets picked up by a bunch of slavers. And he is carted off to as a slave. He is then bought with another lot of them to become gladiators at a small province of the Roman Empire. And he doesn't really want to do this. He'd be perfectly fine dying. And we spent a bit too long on his training and some of those things. But the guy who owns him does wind up really stellar performance, actually, by that gentleman whose name always escapes my remembrance. But round about this time, Commodus has returned. He's in power, and he's doing all the bad things that you do when you're in power, like trying to sleep with his sister. And he reinstitutes the...
Like you do.
Well, George R.R. Martin got it from somewhere, right? I'm kidding. He actually published that long before this movie. The first of those books was published before this movie was made. And he's reinstituting all the games, and he's in conflict with the Senate, and he is not equipped to manage the empire. He does a very bad job of it. But as he reinstitutes the games, this group from that area with Russell Crowe and all of his now slave buddies are carted to Rome to engage in gladiatorial games. And because Maximus knows what he's doing, he leads them to victory in the arena, and then he confronts Commodus, and Commodus is like, well, now I really do kind of want to kill you, but for some reason, now I'm choosing not to become a bloodthirsty dictator because, again, kind of plot armor. So he hangs around as a gladiator for a couple of other gladiatorial events.
So, quick interjection. He realizes that killing him politically is not a great idea when he instantaneously essentially becomes like a celebrity athlete. And you can't kill a celebrity athlete when you're the people's favorite right then and there. You have to fuck them up and fall from grace first. When they're disgraced, then you can do that sort of thing, but not while they're on top of the world. So it's bad timing.
Eh.
Also,
And
Commodus didn't know he was there until
I'm
until
just saying, if it's out of character for him to behave that way, is
that's debatable. So we'll debate it.
we can talk about that in a minute or two.
Yeah.
Look, Commodus is a petulant child, and he gets spat on in that instance, and you're going to tell me that now he exercises restraint?
There's people watching, and when your ego is that fragile, that's what matters.
Fair enough. So he engages in a couple of more gladiatorial events, all of which he is successful in. Commodus's sister and some of the members of the Senate come in and try to get him to orchestrate a coup, because if he can get back to his legions, they will follow him. He was beloved by his men because he's a good leader. And Commodus discovers all this, blackmails his sister into confessing all of it by threatening to murder her child. The coup is stopped. Maximus is stabbed before going out into the arena to fight Commodus because Commodus wants to give him a glorious death. Maximus still kills him because this is the part of the movie where he wins despite having a collapsed lung. And Rome is now leaderless, which is ignoring all the actual political fallout from this kind of an event, because Maximus gets his revenge and then gets his peaceful ending where after dying, he goes to be with his family in heaven, and the slaves are freed and the games are stopped and all is well. And Rome is in charge for another 1,000 years or so, right? Don't pay no attention to the Vandals coming in and the way it's going to collapse and the sundering of the empire and all the other. This movie is wildly inaccurate historically, just wildly.
One of my favorite things about the movie is that it doesn't glorify war in any way. War is a political instrument.
Yeah.
It's an economic instrument. In this era, in this part of the world, territory is a lot more valuable than it is now. You don't have to have a large territory now to be a rich nation. Ask Luxembourg.
Well, that's Taiwan.
Yeah, because you don't necessarily need large acres of farmland in order to prop up your civilization. There's all kinds of things you can do. But back then, one of the impetuses for acquiring large land masses was you needed space to farm. So Rome, I mean, some of it's driven by ego, some of it's driven by, might makes right, but a lot of it's driven by as Hitler once said, we need breathing room. And that's that. Also, if you can conquer your enemies around you, you're a lot more secure. There's a reason why the United States started off with, everything to the right of the Mississippi and went, we're probably better off going the entire way to the west and as far down into Mexico as we can possibly go, and as far up to Canada as they'll let us. That'll make us safe because we have two oceans then protecting us from the rest of the world's nonsense. And they were largely correct until the middle of the 20th century.
I forget who said it, but there was some, it might have been a historian who said that the United States is blessed by geography.
Yeah.
We've got Canadians above us, the Mexicans below us, and nothing else around us.
Yeah. So Rome operated on the same principle. So so Maximus is taking because he is a soldier and he is doing the good work of the government by going forth and conquering the neighbors and acquiring land and making Rome as big as it can be. And he understands that war is a dirty business, but it's a necessary evil. But he does not relish. This is the point that I'm trying to make. And it's his big character trait, which you see later on when he does the gladiating. He does not relish in the death.
Yeah.
Death is bad. These are people. He does not see them as, the George Lucas robots from the Phantom Menace, just send them out there to be massacred. Or even the king in Braveheart, send the Irish in there. It'll be fine.
Arrows cost money. The dead cost nothing.
Right. So he's there to do the good work. but but let's not kill as many men as possible, and the men that die, he generally feels bad about. He does not, and the thing of it is like when it's all over, he's like, I've done my job. You sent me here to do a thing. My thing is done now. I get to go home. And I'll tell you, military people who saw Gladiator was like, oh, good, they're speaking for us. Because I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many of these people I've talked to working in law enforcement, as I have for the past 15 years, have said, we had no problem going, but when it was done, we wanted to go home. In the particular cases, especially during the Iraq War, where there was some retention issues and they weren't quite willing to let people go when they should have, there's a lot of frustration, a lot of anger with the military at that time, and rightly so. The goal is not to war forever. This isn't Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. That's a wrestling thing, fight forever. But even those two guys are like, we'd like to stop now and at least take a breath. So when he's done his bit for God and country, and through no fault of his own, he ends up being betrayed and nearly killed, and then his family is killed. He's like, what was all of the point of this? What was the point of doing any of this when at the end of the day, I am alone, my family is dead, I'm practically dead, I have no home to go back to. What am I going on for? And then it's like, because you're going to do the one thing you've been trained to do and you do really well, go kill. He's like, but I don't want to kill. And then he kind of has this switch, and that's why like the "Are you not entertained?" is a misunderstood line about what he's saying with that. He's like, I don't like what I'm doing here. You shouldn't like it either. Life is valuable. It's a very conservative message, which got lost on a lot of people. And then he was like, all right, fine. You want death? Here's death. Eh. And he like kills people in the most nondescript, like unsatisfying way possible. He's like, you want death? Here's death. How do you like your death? And people are like, boo, this is not entertaining. And he's like, no, 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 no. This is what you wanted, assholes. This is what you wanted. It's
No,
some of the
like
most powerful stuff of the movie.
the irony there being like everyone is shocked by how quickly he kills all those people.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like shocked into silence, and then he looks, and that "Are you not entertained?" is just a sign of absolute disgust
Yeah.
on. And
Well,
now it's like
doesn't
the rallying cry of people at post UFC events asking for a bonus. Please, Emperor Dana,
that's what I
bestow
mean
upon me
by
$50,000.
Gladiator and Fight Club, probably the two most misunderstood movies of the early 2000s.
Up there for sure. And then he throws down his swords. He spits on the ground like, you people disgust me.
Right.
Stalks off, and the crowd starts cheering. Like, give us hell, Quimby. Yay!
I'll tell you what, Ridley Scott, for all of his faults, understood crowd psychology really well.
For a time, absolutely. Another, if we're gonna like talk about problems with the movie, there's a section, like probably the third quarter of it. If we break it up into fourths, about that third fourth is really stretching the material.
Yeah.
It's where we're trying to set up the coup, and we're trying to establish like, no, Commodus is a bad leader. Like, well, we all believe you, but now everyone's taking a bit too much time explaining why, and there's kind of a subplot around the granary stores that he's selling off to fund the games.
Robert, it honestly comes across like in the first draft of the script, they really just wanted to focus on gladiators. Like we just want to see Russell Crowe kill a lot of people, and they're like, there has to be a real movie here. And so like in this, and so like they're just like beef up the ending more, beef up the ending. Like after he's done some fun gladiating stuff, like it's like they had the beginning war, they had the betrayal and the death of his family, the gladiator training, the gladiator stuff, and then they're like, all right, and then the conclusion is his fight with Commodus, and they're like, we're missing an entire third act. How are we getting from gladiator fights to Commodus at the end? They're like, because he does, like that's the that is the heart of the movie. The man who betrays him gets his comeuppance in the end. After Russell Crowe leaps over these enormous hurdles to get there, they're like, there's got to be more than this. This is way flimsy. And so it's like all the like coup political stuff, they just had to keep stuffing because they had nothing in that third act. And they were like, there's got to be something else here besides his fight with Commodus.
Yeah, that's a weak point in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna give another bit of praise. In Hans Zimmer, man, just that guy just doesn't miss.
I said it before. Does Hans Zimmer ever do a bad score? It's like John Williams. Oh, look, John Williams did another good score. Must be a day that ends in Y.
Yeah, but it does in particular, bear pointing out that Zimmer did the music for this, and
Mm-hmm.
it's genuinely top notch. It's among his better work, and
Mm-hmm.
given the honestly, the score's probably more memorable than most of the movie if you really want to break it down. So that's again, that's a giant positive in the thing's favor, but it's a real shame that so much of this movie gets again sort of misremembered or glossed over because kind of to the point you raised earlier, there's a very no, I really hate to use this phraseology because it bothers me for reasons. But this is a discussion about healthy masculinity that goes on in this movie. If
Mm-hmm.
we just look at Maximus, and it's kind of sorely lacking. I mean, Gladiator's one of those movies that was some navel-gazy think piece by some guy who desperately trying to justify the fact that the Atlantic pays him way too much for his word vomit. Talking about like movies that make men cry, or was it that was it was in that one of those? I mean, there's a dozen like YouTube videos on the same thing as well. Like this one gets brought up a lot, and so does Field of Dreams. What's the third one that they always bring up? God, I can't remember. But that's kind of where this movie, like to the extent this movie had a second life, beyond hey, it won an Oscar. Like what makes people come back to it a little over time? And this is kind of the thing that, you're about you and we're about a decade apart, but I was upper teenager when this came out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're that age or older, this is the kind of thing that you watched Brian's Song. That's the other one. Can't believe I forgot that one. The original, not the remake. Don't watch the remake. But that's one of the things. This is one of those things that is like, okay, you're moving. You're moving beyond the 10-year-old phase. Not to point anything out too specifically, but you're getting beyond that. You're moving towards later adolescence. What's the kind of movie you show a early to mid adolescent boy that you think is going to wind up being a positive experience? You could do worse.
Um, as we start to wind down the show here in this last 20 minutes, uh, other than it probably didn't need to be 2.5 hours, you could probably shave 30 minutes off of this,
Give or
and
take, yeah.
you'd have been just fine. Tighten up that ending. Let's get him betrayed and his family killed a little bit faster. Because even this stuff with Aurelius, there's some stuff that the stuff with Aurelius is followed by his conversation with Commodus' sister, which is a sexy scene. Like, she is slimy and slithery in all kinds of sexy ways. She gives off that you're trouble and you're going to get me arrested and I need to run away from you as soon as possible, but you're also alluring and sexy and you're paying attention to me, and boy am I conflicted here. Like this there's all kinds of sexual chemistry between Commodus' sister and Maximus, and it's funny to watch Russell Crowe play that because he's basically like, I can't get away from you fast enough, and she's like, Maximus, don't go, and he can't be like, fuck off, whore, she's the Caesar's daughter, so he's got to give
And
her
I'm married with kids, and I really don't want any of this. So you stay over
yeah,
there.
stop touching me, and she's just like, Commodus, don't run away. And it's like, oh my god, I want to die right now. Like, if he could have jumped into a tree like a cat, he would have. It's a great scene. It's awesome, but it's like, it's literally like this long talky scene of Aurelius trying and failing to convince Maximus to be Caesar. Then this scene of her trying to manipulate him and fuck with him. Then there's the scene with Commodus. It's like right after that of Commodus confronting his father, going, Caesar? He's like, no, you're terrible. Oh, well then die, Dad. I mean, it's like 3 talky scenes in a row with nothing in between. We couldn't shave any of that down? The fuck out of here. Or break it up somewhat?
There's a lot of pure drama in there, and as you mentioned, it's all well acted. Like, it's all really
Yeah.
good stuff.
Honestly, I'm finding things to talk about. Like, if we weren't on this podcast, I wouldn't have complained about that. But it's something I noticed, and I'm like, well, that's worth bringing up.
It is. And as we talked about, like that, there's a segment before the finale that just feels. I appreciate that Ridley Scott at this point in his career was willing to let the camera be still, to just let people act.
Mm-hmm.
But there is some really overwrought stuff about trying to figure out who's behind, like when the coup's being plotted,
Mm-hmm.
and then Commodus trying to get wise to it. And some of it's good. Like the actual scene where Commodus is allegedly talking to his nephew
Mm-hmm.
while looking at his sister and very clearly articulating to her what's going to happen if you don't fall in line.
Right.
Like, that's a really great scene, but there's a lot of repeat in this script.
Yeah. Like I
And
said, this could have been a tight 2 hours. There's one too many babies that Ridley Scott is desperately hanging on to, and he seems to have gotten a blank check from Paramount to just do whatever. Like, go make us a blockbuster prestige picture. And he was like, okay, I understand the assignment. And it was like, no. Just because we asked you to make a blockbuster prestige picture doesn't mean you should take the entire runtime of Killers of the Flower Moon. Like,
hang on, that's excessive. Killers of the Flower Moon is another hour longer than this.
I couldn't think of the Irishman. There we go.
The Irishman is still going.
Yes, I'm well aware. But my point is, like, if I'm producing this, I'm not letting Ridley Scott run away with the film. Because, by the way, I was looking at a headline before this. Like, I was putting together the website, the webpage, and doing all my posts and everything. And so just doing Google searches to bring up like the IMDb or whatever. I happened to see a headline that says there's a 3-hour cut of this. It's got an excessive amount of sex and violence, and I'm like, ugh.
I have seen the extended cut of this,
Mm-hmm.
which is only about like 5 to 7 minutes longer.
Mm-hmm.
Because the extended cut just puts in a couple of extra scenes. It's not wildly different from the theatrical cut, because as Ridley Scott at this point, he had final cut on a lot of his projects after Blade Runner.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because he shouldn't. I don't believe in final cut. I honestly, like, I know some producers don't get it right and they make bad calls, like call Back to the Future, Spaceman from Mars, whatever the fuck they said it was.
Pluto.
Yeah, Pluto. Like, I understand that the business adults don't always get it right, but I think that's the magic, or that used to be the magic of Hollywood, is a collaboration of smart business people, adult, mature business people, and talented artists collaborating to create a product people will actually pay money for and enjoy. And I think a good producer on this one tells Ridley Scott, I'm not letting you put a 2.5-hour movie in theaters. Cut this down to 2 hours. Pick up the pace on this movie. It meanders a little too much in places. Let's keep the pace going. This isn't some sort of art piece indie feature. It's a major blockbuster with a huge marketing budget behind it with major A-list stars. Speed it up, pal. I think the movie would have been better for it.